Thank you for joining us for this webinar about the NEH Mellon Fellowships for Digital Publication. I am Megan Brown, a Program Officer in the Division of Research Programs at the National Endowment for the Humanities. I've been involved with the NEH Mellon Fellowships for the past 2 years and look forward to telling you more about this special funding opportunity. I'm joined by Suhad Kodse, my colleague in the Research Division, who will be monitoring the Q&A box for any questions you might have. I will be speaking for about 30 minutes, and then we'll spend the rest of our time answering your questions. Please send questions to the Q&A box at any time during or after the presentation. Suha will answer some of the questions when they come in, but more complicated ones may be answered at the end during our Q&A time. This webinar will be recorded and archived. As soon as possible, a link will be posted to the NEH Mellon Program website, and it will be added to the NEH's YouTube channel. I'll begin with an overview of the NEH Mellon program and what kinds of projects we support. I will discuss eligibility and what is new in this year's round. Using the review criteria for the program, I will highlight some tips and common mistakes. I'll end with some information on submitting the application and what happens after that. The NEH does its grant work through 6 divisions, each focused on a different kind of work or audience. The Division of Research Programs supports the work of scholars, individually or collaboratively, who work on projects that embody exceptional research, rigorous analysis, and clear writing or communication. The major goal of the NEH Mellon Fellowships is to support the completion of significant humanities projects that require digital expression and digital publication. Proposals from all disciplines and fields are welcome. Strong applications make a compelling case for both the humanities content of the project and its digital design. What kind of contribution will your project make to existing research and discourse? Explain why and how digital means enable or enhance your intellectual argument. For example, you have text that incorporates multimedia components, interactive elements, data visualizations, or flexible reading pathways. One example from previous years is this project by Angela Bennett, who used network data visualizations to show co-concurrences of works within manuscripts that also contain Piers Plowman. You may apply for fellowships ranging from 6 to 12 months. Fellowships are for the whole month, starting on the 1st, and work must be full-time and contiguous. This means you cannot simultaneously teach or perform administrative duties. The stipend is $5,000 per month, so 6 months is about $30,000, while 12 is $60,000. We read drafts for this competition. If you would like us to provide feedback on a draft of the application, send materials to fellowships@neh.gov with the subject line NEH Mellon Draft. You may submit a draft of the narrative, the work plan, and the appendices. It is fine to submit an incomplete draft. We will provide feedback on whatever parts you can get together. The draft deadline is February 28th. The application deadline is April 20th. Recommendation letters are due May the 4th. We do not contact a recommender until after the application deadline. We would notify you of your results by late December, and the earliest you could possibly start is January 1st, 2023. Last year, we received 62 eligible applications, and we funded 9 of them for a funding rate of about 12%. We expect to fund about 8 applications this year. For comparison, our larger fellowships program is similar to many of its requirements. Note that our general fellowships program does not read drafts and has an earlier deadline of April 13th. You may certainly apply to the regular fellowships program with a project that would result in a digital publication. You may not, however, apply to both programs at the same time. If you would like more details about our General Fellowships program, the webinar will be held on Tuesday, February 16th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. So what products are best suited to the NEH Mellon Fellowships? Unlike the General Fellowships program, NEH Mellon Fellowships is designed to support projects that require digital publication to be fully realized. They can include, but are not limited to, digital monographs, peer-reviewed articles, websites, virtual exhibitions, digital scholarly editions or translations with annotations or critical apparatus, maps, images or data visualizations with interpretive layers, or digital models or manipulables with interpretive content. Here are some recent examples. Elaine Sullivan's Constructing the Sacred, Visibility and Ritual Landscape in the Egyptian Necropolis of Saqqara was published by Stanford University Press and won the American Historical Association's Roy Rosenzweig's Prize for Innovation in Digital History in 2020. Henry B. Lovejoy's The Liberated Africans Project is a website with a large database and thorough scholarly analysis. And Whitney Tretien's Cut, Copy, Paste, to be published through Manifold Scholarship Platform at the University of Minnesota Press, is a forthcoming treatise that incorporates many different digital elements. So what don't we fund? Here's a partial list. With many of these restrictions, such as the prohibition against standalone databases and digitization projects, we stress the importance of interpretation. We're looking for projects that make an argument. Other restrictions are agency-wide, such as our prohibition against advocacy of any specific public policy or political action. For the full list, we ask that you check the notification of funding opportunity under funding restrictions, which is in section D6. Who can apply? Proposals from all disciplines and fields in the humanities are welcome, as are projects from the social sciences and sciences that apply humanities methods. So in other words, any project that includes humanistic interpretation. We especially welcome independent scholars and junior scholars. You do not need to be affiliated with or on tenure-track employment by an institution or organization. All U.S. citizens are eligible, as are foreign nationals who have lived in the United States for the 3 years preceding the 2022 application deadline. You do not have to have an advanced degree to apply, but you cannot currently be enrolled in a degree program. For currently enrolled students, if you have satisfied all requirements for a degree and are just awaiting its conferral, you are eligible, but you must include a letter from the dean of the conferring school or your department chair attesting to your status as of the application deadline in April 20th, 2022. New in 2022. So if you've applied before, the changes this year are truly minor. We are, however, consistently tweaking things so that we can better help folks tell the best story about their research and improve the fair application of our requirements. I always recommend that you consult the current notification of funding opportunity when preparing your application. All of the major elements of this year are the same. We require a 3-page narrative, a 1-page work plan, a 1-page bibliography, a 2-page resume, and in this program, you should provide an appendix that includes some visual explanation of the organization of your project, either a wireframe, sitemap, or screenshots. If your project has many visual elements, you can also include 1 page of visual samples. This will also be as a PDF. The appendices cannot exceed 5 pages. The one change to the application this year, truly minor, we now provide a bit more guidance on formatting, including a minimum font size of 11 points, recommended fonts, and a minimum margin size. Your application should be single-spaced. As we move to application tips, you should start out by thinking about the timeline of your application from submission to notification and plan ahead. The federal grant process is long, about 8 months for NEH Mellon applications. Submission is by April 20th, 2022. Peer review panels meet in June. The NEH's National Council on the Humanities, which meets 3 times a year, will review the staff's funding recommendations in November. The chairman of the endowment then makes the final funding decisions shortly thereafter, and notifications for the applicants are sent out in late December. Keep these steps and the timeline in mind as you plan and prepare your application. Before you start writing your application, your first step should be to study the criteria that we give to the reviewers to guide the evaluation of your project. You can find them under E1 in the application review information on page 16 of the notification of funding opportunity. I highly recommend that you use these criteria to structure and present your project. Starting on page 9 of the guidelines under Attachment 1 Narrative, you will see that each subheading of the narrative and other attachments are keyed to one of these criteria. You want to make it easy for your reviewers to see how each part of the application speaks to the appropriate criterion. But remember that the criteria can be relevant in more than one section, and that taken together, the parts of the narrative should form a coherent whole. I will now go through the individual criteria with some further tips. Remember that writing a grant application is its own genre. It's different from a scholarly essay or an article or a book perspective, and it needs a bit of strategy. Under the subheading, Significance and Contribution, tell your reader in a succinct way what your project is about and why it is important. You should explain what it will contribute to your specific field in a way that a humanities generalist can understand. There will be people from many different disciplines on one panel, and so it's important not to use very specialized jargon or confusing language. The application will be more compelling if you can situate your project in the broader context of humanities research and knowledge. Consider your audience, and by this I mean your audience for your project, not just the people on the panel. Are you aiming at scholars, general audiences, or both? Ask yourself, how will your project change the audience's understanding of the topic? How will we think differently? You can always take a step back and say, does this project tell us anything larger? Press yourself to see the broader significance of your work for the humanities. One way to stress your contribution is to describe how your work fits in with other work in your field that is addressed in the same subject. A short survey of where scholarship is can be really helpful. What peer projects exist? Are you taking research in a new direction? Are you exploring new material or using a new method? In short, what is unique, important, or new about your project and how will it enhance scholarship in the field? Be as detailed and specific as you can. Under the subheading in your narrative called Organization Concepts and Methods, articulate specific research questions and explain the methods, concepts, and approaches you will use to address them. Are you using previously untapped primary sources? Are you proposing an entirely new interpretation of your subject? Are you adapting a methodology from another field? How is the methodology you choose appropriate to your project? You should make clear why digital publication is essential. What are you doing that can't be done in print? Explain the digital methods and the reasons for choosing a particular technology, platform, or software. Where possible, provide an outline of the chapters or sections and the digital publication's design. Be clear about the data your project will collect or generate, and include, if relevant, a statement about the public access and any rights or requirements that come into play. So, for example, provisions to ensure the protection of privacy, confidentiality, security of information, disability access, questions of intellectual property rights, and others. Use your bibliography and appendix to strengthen and illustrate the point you make regarding significance, method, and contribution. If you are proposing a dissertation revision, state this and explain the changes, revisions, and expansions that you plan to do and how they will improve the original work. For editions and translations, digital exhibitions, and digital models, describe the project's scholarly apparatus. So in other words, the introduction, the annotations, and any paratextual materials. The interpretive nature of your project should be clear. Generally, peer reviewers find that a well-written, clear application is a predictor of the quality of the planned publication, so writing a good abstract and narrative is important. Remember to stay within the 3-page limit for the narrative and follow the formatting guidance. I recommend avoiding footnotes. The other main components are the 1-page work plan, 1-page bibliography, 2-page CV, and the appropriate appendices. Follow the guidelines carefully to ensure that your submission is not declared ineligible on these grounds. We have received guidance that specifying the font size and formatting of our documents will improve fairness by ensuring that you all have the same amount of space. Please do not try to shrink the CV visually to fit more onto 2 pages. Instead, cut to highlight your relevant achievements. The 1-page work plan is a critical element to the application because it lets us know how you will use taxpayers' money to do work during the grant period. Provide a detailed work plan in your 1, 2, or 3-month segments. Be realistic about how much work you can get done during the grant period. Don't overpromise. Be specific and think about what stage your project will be in when the award period starts. Remember that this is 9 or more months from when your application date. State where you are now and plan out where you will be then. You do not need to complete the entire project within the grant period, but you should provide a reasonable timeline for completion. If you will be relying on institutional support or other sources for assistance with the technology-related work, describe this, the roles of the people involved, and whether funding for this assistance is in place. You cannot plan to split a single individual award among several collaborators. If you have an equal partner on a project who also needs funding, you could each submit one application. You may also seek funds as part of a larger collaborative project, but in both of these cases, whether you are one collaborator among a group or if there are several collaborators each submitting their own application, clearly explain how the work will be divided and the extent to which each collaborator's contribution depends on the others. If your project is truly collaborative and needs additional funding from multiple people, you should consider the NEH's Collaborative Grants program, which has a specific evaluation stream for scholarly digital projects. Under the subheading of the narrative, Competencies, Skills, and Access, explain how your prior work led to the current project. Emphasize your academic strengths and achievements that are relevant to the present project and give a realistic self-assessment of your experience with digital humanities. Many people are stronger in one area than the other. Be honest and don't exaggerate. NEH Mellon Fellowships want to encourage the academics to venture into digital publication and explore its possibilities. If your project requires archival access, explain your previous contacts with the archive or repository. It is important to address any questions of copyright that might arise from your project. Describe what the ultimate digital publication will look like, how it will work and serve the intended audiences, and how it will be disseminated. Who will host it? How will it be accessed? What steps are you taking to ensure accessibility by diverse populations? What are your plans for preservation and sustainability? We do not require projects to be sustained in perpetuity, but we do require an explicit plan for how the project will be sustained beyond the period of funding. Mention the expected publication date and publisher if you have one lined up. Reviewers usually look favorably on projects that undergo rigorous peer review prior to publication. Do include a URL if one already exists, but if you do include one, either for a prototype site, a GitHub repository, or other, make sure that there is something there for evaluators to see when they go to it. To wrap up, the fellowship's duration is 6 to 12 months. You must devote 100% of your time during the fellowship to the project, free of teaching or other obligations. Tenure must be continuous. As I mentioned, we accept voluntary drafts for the narrative section submitted by February 28th or earlier. Deadline is April 20th. Notification is in late December. Start dates can be any time between January 1, 2023 and September 1, 2024. There's a 20-month window to start your project. The NEH Mellon Fellowships program makes up to 8 awards per year. Based on the average application numbers, the funding rate is between 10 and 12%. Do not let these numbers discourage you. It's a competitive program, but you can't get a grant unless you apply. If you do not get an award the first time around, we encourage you to ask for the panelists' feedback on your application, revise it accordingly, and reapply at the next deadline. A new set of panelists will review your submission and will not know if it has been rejected before. For the NEH, every application is a new application. So now I'm going to ask Suha if there are any questions. Suha?
Thank you, Megan. Let me go over there are like 4 interesting questions. The first one is very basic. Are we not qualified for this grant if we are at the beginning stages of our project? I answered that all stages are welcome, but please feel free to elaborate or add more information.
Absolutely. If you are at the very beginning of your project, that is perfectly fine. We do accept applications at all stages. You will want to be clear about your choices that you have already made, what you are currently trying to make, and where you are in that process. So if you haven't, for instance, settled on which platform would be the best to support your project, that's fine. But sort of you want to explain where you are in the research process leading up to that choice. And any factors that would influence it. We do want to see that you have already made a decision that this project requires digital publication. So you'll need to explain that thoroughly, particularly if you're at a very early stage, why you believe that digital publication is the necessary output. Happy to answer any follow-up questions on that.
Thank you. There is a question I didn't answer, and that's the third question we kind of received. Can you elaborate on at the end on what qualifies as, quote, full-time, unquote, regarding having other employment during the length of the fellowship? Is there a document that specifies these stipulations?
What this means is that you cannot have teaching obligations, administrative obligations, or other employment that takes time. So I'm not sure if we have an exact document on that, and I could follow up with you if you would like to email me. So if you would like to send me that to mjbrown@neh.gov, I will be happy to follow up with you about that.
Good. Thank you. Let's see. Though NEH Mellon Fellowships don't fund standalone documentaries or a documentary supplemental to a monograph, can an individual apply to the NEH Fellowship for a project making a traditional monograph and a supplementary documentary, not through a nonprofit organization, but as an individual?
So all fellowships are always given to individuals. This fellowship program for digital publication does not fund standalone documentaries. What we would fund is if there was say, for example, a complex website that had some short videos and interpretive content and explanatory, apparatus. You could have a component of the website that is a documentary element. So if you had short videos as part of a larger project, that would be fine, but no standalone documentaries. Is that clear?
Okay, good. If we are building a blog or website that will provide the general public as well as researchers access to otherwise non-digitized materials, can the interpretation be aimed at a general audience, or does it need to be aimed at specialists or doctoral level students?
No, a general audience is perfectly fine as your target audience. We have funded projects aimed at the general audience before. There's a fantastic one on World War I women in the Navy waves that was funded through this program, and we can get that URL for you if you would like. But yes, general audience is perfectly fine as your target audience.
Sorry, let me go through. Is there another NEH fellowship for digital projects? Can you explain the difference in focus?
Let me see if I understand that question correctly. So this fellowships are aimed at digital publications. Our general fellowships program, which is the one that has the deadline of April 13th and has the webinar on February 16th. That program can accept projects that have digital outcomes, but it also accepts projects that have traditional monograph outcomes or traditional print outcomes. So that program has many, many more applicants because it's not restricted to just digital projects. So they get about 1,200 applications and we get about 60. So if you want to do the math on the odds there.
Megan, can you explain what is meant by interpretive element?
So an interpretive element is an apparatus or part of your project that makes an argument. So if you are arguing for a specific theory about a historical time period, a specific interpretation of a literary text, or other humanistic argument, That would be the interpretive element. So if you have a scholarly digital edition, the apparatus that makes an argument about the text, so the annotations and footnotes and any kind of information that provides extra information about difficult passages, that would be the interpretive element. This project cannot support straight transcription. So if you were, for instance, just transcribing a historical document without that interpretive element, we could not support that. And we could not support, for instance, a database of primary source data that does not have the argumentative interpretation element.
Next question is, and I'm quoting, my project, for instance, has 2 layers of permission, one for my access and one for publication. I have the first, but will be asking for the second. Can I apply with only the former in hand, but with an expectation of receiving the latter, but which is not in my hand by the deadline for the application?
In the past, evaluators have been very concerned if the application does not have permission to publish at the time of application. They're concerned with funding a project that, if you never got the permission to publish, would not be able to move forward. So I would recommend making sure that your permissions are in place at the time of application.
Let me see the next question. If the project has a utility beyond the interpretive element, should we discuss that? For example, if it will include a database, should we discuss in the application the ways it could be used outside of the interpretive element?
Absolutely. We see these complex projects as working as a whole. A great example is the Liberated Africans project I mentioned earlier in the presentation. That project has a database and an interpretive element, and we funded that project. So we don't fund standalone databases, and the interpretive element is important to the evaluation process. But by all means, in your application, talk about the utility of the data associated with your project.
Good. Let's see. Do you happen to have any examples of independent researchers' projects funded through this program? I've noticed many of the examples on the website seem to be institutionally affiliated.
Unfortunately, I don't have any completed projects at this moment that are independent researchers. By all means, you should apply and hopefully be the first to get finished. It's about who's done and who's not. So I'm sorry, I don't.
Will this webinar be available to rewatch afterward?
Absolutely. Give us a couple days to make sure I don't have terribly awkward pauses in the middle of it, which I very well might. And we will get it posted both to the NEH website and make sure there are links everywhere for you. But it'll be on the NEH Mellon Fellowships website, right next to the area where the notification of funding opportunity is, so that you can rewatch to your heart's content.
Next question is, if we are new to digital humanities and will need to learn new skills or how to use some of the technologies or methods, should we discuss in the application our plans to gain those skills?
Yes, particularly if they will be done before the grant period begins. Many evaluators like to see that you have plans to address anything that you would see as a hurdle in the way of doing your project. This is a great time to mention, if you're taking any additional coursework or if you have plans to brush up on a specific tool or platform. This is a fellowship, so there's no budget associated with it. So if you plan to use some of the money during the grant period to brush up on something, that's fine as well.
Next question, are applications to be submitted through the university, and will that be where the grant goes?
No, this is an individual fellowship. So you would submit the grant directly as an individual, and the grant would be paid directly to you as an individual. There is no university overhead allowed in this program, and it does not go to your university. It's an individual award.
With regard to a virtual exhibition and the issue of permissions, would all artworks need to be secured at time of the application, or can the application indicate states are currently being talked to, etc.?
By all means, you can apply before you have actually secured the permissions. Just realize that if you should explain where you are in that process so that your evaluators know that and can judge the likelihood that you will be successful. Evaluators tend to get concerned if there is no sign that someone has addressed permissions, but if there's active talks going on and people are clear about their process, that tends to allay concerns.
How much interpretation would you expect in a website aimed at the general public?
There should be a clear argument to your research. And so we would expect to have the elements of the website making a clear statement about the topic that is being addressed.
Since we would need to work on the project full time, how have recipients received health insurance?
Many recipients remain employed by their university if they are employed by universities. You can take this up, for instance, during a sabbatical year. That would be perfectly fine. Otherwise, unfortunately, you are responsible for organizing your own health insurance. And we realize that $5,000 a month does not go as far as it used to, but that is what we are able to spend. So that is what has been allotted to this program. It would have to come out of that.
If my academic status changes between the deadline of the application and the decision, is there a way to update the application data?
No, I don't believe so, although I can double check with my, I'm sure this has come up before. Your academic status only matters in this program if you are currently enrolled in a degree program. And for that, you have to be just simply awaiting conferral of the degree at the time of application. So as long as you have finished all requirements for the degree program prior to April 20th, and you have that letter attesting to that, that's the only academic status that would matter. If you are, for instance, adjuncting now and become affiliated with a different university after you have applied, that doesn't matter to us. This program is equally open to people who are on the tenure track and not. Does that clarify that? Hopefully.
Okay, let me check to see if there are any additional questions.
I think I see one about recommendations for an independent researcher.
Yeah.
My recommendations for an independent researcher are going to be the same as my recommendations for a tenure track professor, which is to read the notification of funding opportunity very carefully, follow it closely, start your draft early, and have someone who is not really very deeply associated with your project read it over. We have panelists from a wide range of humanities disciplines read these applications, and you want to be sure that your project is clear to someone who's outside of your immediate field. That's one of the problems we often see, is that there is something about the project that is not being fully explained to someone who is not really familiar with it. So we definitely recommend having someone read over your application and double check that you're being perfectly clear about how important your topic is and the major elements. That and really following the notification of funding opportunity.
We have another question about the stipend monthly payment. Can someone collect salary while on sabbatical and get a fellowship? That is to say, will the grantee be paid directly or the university?
The grantee will be paid directly, and yes, you can do that while on sabbatical. You just can't teach during or have administrative duties. So a sabbatical is a perfect time to do this.
Let's see, the next question. Sorry.
I see someone asking if this is for education research professionals only, and the answer is no. Any U.S. citizen is eligible to apply. So, you know, you do not have to be in higher education. If you have a digital project that would reach you know, the general audience an important topic, or if you are someone who is not in academia but you want to have a say in an academic discipline, that is perfectly fine, and you are eligible to apply.
If someone works at a nonprofit organization that does not focus on research, or a corporation that does not use one's research, are they qualified to apply? I think you answered that, Megan.
That's the one I was just answering. Yes, the answer is yes. You are eligible to apply. I also see one about being a postdoctoral fellow or researcher. Again, yes, perfectly eligible to apply. You just can't be in a degree program. That's our only restriction there.
Are applicants limited to education, research, professionals only? For example, if I work, I think you've answered this question, but I'll repeat the question again anyway.
I know. Yeah.
Okay.
I got that one too, huh?
All right. It seems they posted it twice. That's why.
Okay.
Additional questions?
Okay, we will finish the question and answer session then. If something comes up, by all means, email us at fellowships.neh.gov, and we will be happy to answer your question by email. Thank you very much.